Hello everyone. It's been a little while since I did the Elden Ring Remembrance Boss ranking video. A lot of things have changed over that time. I did a whole nother playthrough on the channel, in addition to doing several more playthroughs in my own time. I've gotten a lot better at playing the game. I don't rely on Mimic Tier and weapon art spam anymore, like I did towards the end of that playthrough, which is very embarrassing. And as a result, my opinions on quite a few of the bosses have changed. They've changed enough that I would say my personal ranking of the best bosses in the game has changed somewhat significantly since the release of that video. So, definitely not an effort to replicate the magic of my most popular video, I'm going to be here today ranking what I consider to be the top 10 best bosses in Elden Ring. Not Remembrance bosses, though. They will pretty much all be Remembrance bosses anyway. So, before we get into that, you should be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. The next big subscriber goal for the channel is going to be hitting 10,000, so if you haven't already, definitely hit that subscribe button. You can leave your own predictions for what you think my rankings will be in the comments, or share your own personal top 10 ranking. I'll be very interested in seeing what you all have to say. And without any further ado, let's get right into the list. At the number 10 spot, I'm already kind of cheating because I have two bosses here. I couldn't decide who I liked more over Margaret the Fell Omen and Godric the Grafted. The reason they are so close together here is because, well, they're both really close together in the actual game, but they have a lot of really good strengths that I kind of have to weigh, and it's really hard to decide which ones are more valuable than the other. I think they work together kind of sharing this number 10 spot, and that they both serve as a very good close to the opening of the game. For starters, Margaret is ridiculously complex. The amount of moves and combos that he has for an early game boss is absolutely absurd. Whoever on the development team decided to put this complicated of a boss as essentially the first major boss in the game was an absolute sociopath, and they should get a raise. Because normally, you have to wait until like at least halfway through the game to fight a boss like this. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to compare Margaret to the Asylum Demon or to Udex Gundyr, and I don't think that's really a good idea, because Margaret's not the tutorial boss. The tutorial boss is arguably the Soldier of Godric, which is kind of embarrassing, but Margaret serves a very different role. I mean, I suppose he serves a similar role, and that those guys are supposed to teach you how to play the game, pretty much. And Margaret kind of does that, but he's indicative of how different a game Elden Ring is. He's less there to teach you how to do combat, and more so to say, hey, this guy's really difficult. If you're having a tough time against him, maybe you should go out and explore a little bit. Find some new weapons, some upgrade material, get some more levels, and then come back here and see if you can take him on. Elden Ring has a bit of a different formula than Dark Souls, and I think that's something that a lot of people have had trouble recognizing, which has led to a lot of the complaints people have about a lot of the bosses. However, that doesn't mean that Margaret is totally exempt from criticism, because I do agree that he's a little bit too aggressive, and some of his combo chaining is stupid. It's ridiculous. Then we have Godric, who I don't think really has as much of the mechanical issues as Margaret. I think he's easier than Margaret, but he's still just as, if not more fun than Margaret. He has a very satisfying moveset to play against. Another thing he has over Margaret is that there's actual build-up to him going into his fight. Pretty much as soon as you get out of the opening area, you've got Vare telling you, oh, you should go kill Godric, he's a bitch. And then various other characters essentially telling you that. Pretty much all of Limgrave builds up to going to fight Godric. You go through the castle, you see all his fucked up shit, and then you fight him. The presentation of the fight is great, his cutscenes are wonderful, his voice acting is phenomenal, that transition cutscene is insanely over the top and one of my personal favorites in the series. It's great. The only thing I would say that I don't really like about Godric is that whirlwind attack of his. You have like 2 frames of telegraphing for that. That's a little bit much. That's a little excessive. A little unreasonable, even. And I don't really like unreasonable stuff. But Godric and Margaret are both really fun bosses. They've really got a lot going for them, especially for where they are placed in the game. And I would say these two together make what have to be my favorite opening section of maybe any Soulsborne game. In the number 9 spot, I have Radigan of the Golden Order and the Elden Beast. Finally, here is the final boss, who you meet as the culmination of your quest to finally get into the Erd Tree. And what are you treated with? You're treated with the main theme from the title screen being used as the final boss theme, and also the reveal of Radigan indeed being Marika, if you didn't find that stuff out earlier, striking a sick-ass pose, having the character design of all time. If it were just Radigan on his own, he would perhaps be very close to the top of not only this list, but my list of all Soulsborne bosses. His moveset is phenomenal. It's great. The only thing that I think may be kind of bad about it, kind of an issue, would be his teleport attack. The fact that he can just kind of teleport to the same space right on top of you, the telegraphing fort's not the best. I think that move's a little iffy. But outside of that, Radigan is almost flawless. The thing that drags this fight down is the Elden Beast. And even then, I don't think the Elden Beast is the worst thing ever. Its reveal and its initial presentation are really good. The arena you fight it in is beautiful and generally spacious, but I don't think spacious enough because the invisible walls are a bit annoying. Where they are is not really clear until you get to them, and also, you totally should have been able to ride Torrent during this fight, because with the size of the arena and the amount of time that Elden Beast is going to spend moving around, it would have probably been much more enjoyable if you could use Torrent, just like you could with the Fire Giant and a lot of the field bosses. It would have been a lot better then. However, I do think the worst part of the fight is probably Elden Stars. Like, just the constant damage ticking and staggering, and he can also do other attacks at the same time. Not very good. I think it's been nerfed a little bit since launch, but still not very good. The mediocrity of a lot of Elden Beast is what drags down Radigan from reaching higher heights within this list. In the number 8 spot, I have Melania, the Blade of Mikola. This is a boss who I have a much higher opinion of now than I did back after release. And I think a lot of that has to do with me just getting better at the game. Just getting over my skill issue and actually trying to learn the boss. Because when you do that, you find that, for the most part, Melania is actually a pretty good time. She has what I consider to be some of the highest highs of all the bosses in Elden Ring, but also some of the most obnoxious lows. Starting off with the positives, you have build-up to Melania throughout essentially the entirety of the game. You basically have all of Caelid building up to her, and then the entire Halig Tree questline. It's really good. Then you get to her actual boss, and the presentation of the arena, the OST, the intro cutscene, Melania's design on its own. It's all great. It's really, really good. It's all way up there. And her actual moveset is really good. She's really fun to fight against. It's very challenging. She's very aggressive, and takes quite a bit of practice to get to really know her tells, her openings, how to avoid her attacks. But once you do that, it's really satisfying to do, and you can do it pretty reliably. Then you get that one move where that's not really the case. Waterfall Dance, or as I called it way back in the day, the anime bullshit. I have managed to dodge Waterfall, I think completely at least twice now, and I'm able to dodge it mostly semi-consistently now. However, I do still believe that Waterfall is unreasonable. What it demands from the player in terms of precision with iframes is kind of ridiculous. Even to the extent that it doesn't seem to really have to do with iframes, you basically have to kind of trick the AI in order to avoid waterfall. You gotta unlock and run around her, or just hope that you're far enough away from her it can just sprint in the other direction. But if you don't have any stamina left after doing an attack, like you just did a jumping attack or something, you're fucked. Because Melania can just do waterfall at any time after any move that she does, once she loses, I think, like 30% of her health. Meaning there's no real telegraphing to it. You just kind of have to guess when she's going to do waterfall, which leads to you being extremely cautious when fighting her. And that leads you to not want to engage with her, which is bad. The best bosses encourage engagement. Look at Ishin. Look at Gale. These are bosses that you want to get up close to when you're fighting. You don't want to stay away from them. That's not really the case with Melania a lot of the time, because waterfall is just so lethal and so hard to dodge under certain circumstances that it discourages getting up close and engaging with the boss. Another thing that does that is something that technically makes her easier, and that's that she has really low poise. She's really easy to just keep knocking onto the ground and not let her do anything, which encourages cheesing her. It discourages actually mastering the boss, learning her moveset, all that great stuff, and encourages just cheesing her. So when you put together a move that will likely be ending your runs against her if you haven't mastered dodging it, and, if you're not lucky, because a lot of the time it does just come up to luck, and the ability to cheese her really easily, you have a boss that has a lot going on, but for a lot of people, they're not going to bother engaging with a lot of that stuff. They're just going to use whatever scummy cheese tactics they can, like I've done, and just steamroll her without really getting to see anything from her. And I think that's really unfortunate, because if it weren't for these mechanical flaws, if they toned down waterfall and they increased her poise, I have no doubt that Melania would genuinely be in the conversation for one of the best Soulsborne bosses ever. Alas, here we are. In the number 7 spot, I have Reichard, the Lord of Blasphemy. I'm not going to have as much to say about him as the previous bosses because, well, he's a spectacle fight, which means he's relatively simple, but he's a good Storm Ruler fight. Do you know why he's a good Storm Ruler fight? Because he's an actual fight. That's right, folks. Instead of just swinging the Storm Ruler at a borderline not doing anything target 5 times, no, you are given a special weapon and you just fight the boss normally with a special weapon, which takes what would have maybe just been a normal fight and makes it really fucking cool. It makes it a big spectacle with fantastic presentation. The arena is great, Reichard's design is great, the OST is great, Reichard's VA is great. Pretty much everything about this fight's great. I love it. Reichard is always a blast. There will never come a time when I don't look forward to fighting the Lord of Blasphemy. In the number 6 spot, I have Starscourge Radon. I don't think I really need to spend a lot of time talking about Radon, because everyone understands why Radon's high up on the list. He has build-up throughout the entirety of Caelid. You have Alexander's questline and the references to the Radon Festival leading up to him, which, by the way, the Radon Festival, in my opinion, is probably the most unique and interesting lead-ups we've ever had to a boss fight. It does a phenomenal job at building up hype to the Radon fight. Another thing that does that is his pre-fight hype-up cutscene, which I don't think any other boss has ever gotten except for, I guess, kind of Calamite. He's the only other one that gets a cutscene before you actually fight him, before you actually enter the boss arena. But even then, it's not talking about how fucking cool and insane Calamite is. Radon is cool as shit and very insane, both mentally and in terms of what actually happened in the fight. You guys all know it. The thing that makes this fight so great is that you can lead an army of phantoms to battle him in this old abandoned battlefield in the Wailing Dunes. The presentation for this fight is top-notch, really. Radon's moveset on its own is honestly not that complex. It's a bit intimidating. It's pretty wide-reaching. He's not exactly easy, but I would say he's fairly simple. And once you've become decent enough at the game, it's not that hard to solo Radon without the summons, but Why would you want to fight him without the summons? That's part of the fun. It's you and the boys going to defeat a demigod amongst a plane of the dead. It's phenomenal. It's great. His phase transition's fucking ridiculous. And, he has Leonard. So, I feel like these are reasons enough for Radon earning his place in the upper echelon of Elden Ring bosses. Entering the top 5, we have Malekith the Black Blade, who was originally my number 2 boss. Why has he gone down? Well, I've been able to better recognize some of his shortcomings, and I've also just kind of recognized how great some other bosses are. The problems that Malekith has are just 2 in number. They're not the biggest things ever, but when we start to get into the best bosses in the game, there are things that become more important. The first problem is in Malekith's first phase as the Beast Clergyman. I think he has a bit of a hyper-aggression problem. It's the same thing Margaret has, it's the same thing Melania kind of has a little bit. He is just doing way too many attacks as the Beast Clergyman. It's very hard to recognize and get into openings. He's just kind of ridiculous. However, I would not go so far as to say he is unfair, because it is possible to do that phase no hit. He has openings. They are just very hard to recognize and capitalize on. It takes a lot of practice to master the Beast Clergyman, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's the kind of thing that takes down the enjoyability a little bit. He's not as satisfying to master as some other bosses are. The other problem is that Phase 2 has just too little health. The Black Blade, which has probably the coolest phase transition ever, and, in general is just kind of the coolest ever, doesn't last long enough. Yeah, he's hyper-aggressive and does a shitload of damage, but I'd say he's not as aggressive as Beast Clergyman, and his attacks are, frankly, a lot easier to dodge. So I wish this phase lasted a bit longer, because it's obviously the best part of the fight, but I think it's fine that he has so little health, because he just does so much damage to you. You're basically both glass cannons. It's going to turn into a bit of a damage contest to see who can kill who first. And I don't think that's really a problem. I think that makes the fight a little bit more exciting, a little bit more nerve-wracking, which is always a good part of any challenge. In general, I'd say Malekith, despite these 2 problems, is still an absolutely phenomenal boss fight. In the number 4 spot, I have Margaret the Omen King, who used to be my favorite boss in the game. So what changed? Well, the thing is that he still has the same, are his great build-up, presentation, spectacle, and character. The lead-up to his fight is great. Margaret would not be as good of a boss if it weren't for Margaret. He largely builds upon Margaret as an encounter, first off because you're going to have a grudge against him. More likely than not, he kicked the shit out of you your first time around, so when you meet this guy again at the foot of the Erd Tree, you're going to have a little bit of a bone to pick with him. So that gives the player a lot more investment in the fight. Then you have his actual mechanical building upon Margaret, and that you take a lot of Margaret's moves, but you just change them up a bit. Instead of 1 knife, now he's throwing 3. Instead of just using his cane, he's using his sword, so a lot of his movements are more fluid, and he's flipping around a lot more. His moveset is a lot cooler. He's also basically starting off from Margaret Phase 2, which is then built upon with even more summoned weapons and special moves that he does. Overall, he's still a very fun boss fight. He's still an absolute blast, and I still consider him to be one of the best bosses in the game. But he does have, yet again, 2 flaws. The first flaw, he's got too many combos, he does too many attacks. It's less, oh, I can't dodge through this correctly. It's, there are literally not any openings here. This isn't the case for all of his moves, but he does have like a 17 attack combo that you have to spend 20 seconds watching. That's kind of ridiculous. It's cool to watch, but you don't really play these games to watch the bosses. You play the games to fight the bosses, and you can't really fight the boss when you have to spend half of it just standing around watching him complete a combo. The other issue is that he has way too little health for where he is in the game. He's in kind of a weird spot where if you don't do any of the optional stuff, well, technically everything leading up to him is optional, but you don't do any of the side quest stuff. You only fight 2 shard bearers and then you go to Langdell. Yeah, he'll still be fairly difficult, but if you actually go and do all of the other stuff you can do up until that point, you're going to steamroll him. I have seen so many people that have barely been able to get anything out of the Morgott boss fight because it's over in like 2 minutes. They beat him the first try. They barely get time to appreciate the boss. Just go look at a bunch of the streamers back when Elden Ring first came out. They dog-walked Morgott. And I think that's kind of an issue. I think Morgott should have served a similar purpose to Margaret, gatekeeper for third act, honestly. And he doesn't really serve that purpose anymore. He's, frankly, probably easier to beat than a lot of the other bosses that you can go and fight before him. And I really think that Morgott probably should have been a bit more difficult. At the very least, give him some more health so the fight lasts longer against, like, level 80 characters and stuff. That's around when most people will probably be fighting him. And if he had a little bit more staying power, he'd probably be finding his way back up to the top of the list. Alas, here he is now in the number 4 spot. In the number 3 spot, I have Dragonlord Placida Sax. This is going to be a little bit like Reichard again, in that I don't really have too much to say about Placida Sax, because a lot of the stuff about him kind of goes without saying. Almost all of my love for this fight is based purely on presentation and spectacle. It's kind of unmatched in that department. Honestly, you fight this giant, decaying, 2-headed dragon in a giant coliseum inside of a storm outside of time. He uses lightning claws and teleports and can summon a lightning nuke and does fucking Shin Godzilla laser attacks. Do I need to say much else? I don't think so. Placida Sax's position as one of the best bosses in the game kind of goes without saying. In the number 2 spot, I have Moog, the Lord of Blood. This is the boss that I have maybe gained the most appreciation for, save one, ever since the last video. I remember seeing a lot of people that would say, oh, yeah, Moog is my favorite boss in the game. Moog is the best boss in the game. And I just didn't really see it. I fought him, I liked him, but I didn't think there was really anything too special about him. So, what I did, what was it, like a month ago now? I decided I'm going to take the Moog pill. I'm just going to try and master Moog, because he's apparently the most satisfying boss to master in the game. Started off practicing against the Omen down in the Landell sewers, spent about 45 minutes fighting him, no summons, and managed to beat him. Then we go to the Lord of Blood. I think in total I fought him for about 3 hours, and you know what? I loved every second of it. It is a testament to the quality of a boss that you can fight it for 3 hours without winning and not get frustrated, not want to stop, just want to keep fighting him. Mechanically, I would say without question Moog is the best boss in the game. There is no other boss that has a moveset quite as satisfying to master and dodge through. The big reason for this is his delays. For a lot of other bosses, the delayed attacks are annoying. It's an interruption of the tempo that feels unnatural, like it's intentionally meant to trip up the player, almost like it's artificial difficulty. With Moog, all of his attacks are delayed, so it's just the same tempo throughout. It's just you learning the rhythm to which you should be dodging Moog's attacks. They are not obvious. You can't just dodge as soon as he starts the attack, because they're kind of slow, they have delays to them. You have to actually spend time learning his moveset, learning his timings. It's even more satisfying with his Blood Flame attacks, especially the Blood Claw explosion with that delay there. That's great. You also have to take into consideration your positioning in the arena because of the blood trails and stuff. That's a very interesting component. Definitely adds a lot to the fight. And the Phase 2 is basically just upgrading the Phase 1. He has more delayed explosion attacks. He flies around, he throws more blood flame all over the place. A lot of his other moves are just kind of upgraded. He's great. He's absolutely wonderful. I think if Moog had a little bit more build-up, a little bit more added to his presentation, and maybe a little bit more character to him, I think he would probably be the best boss in the game.
Alas, I am returned. To be granted audience once more. Upon my name as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord.
And here we have such a boss, with Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, also known as Horalu. Godfrey has a presence and build-up throughout the entirety of the game. You see depictions of him, you have references to him, you see the lasting cultural impact he's had on the lands between. You fight his shade before you go fight Morgoth, so that's basically you getting a taste of what's to come, a little bit of practice for his phase 1, and then you have the actual presentation for the boss. You fight him in the same arena as Morgoth, which is really cool, but now it's on fire, and the entire city of Leyndell is covered in ash, and he's there cradling the dead body of his son, who dissolves into grace, and the guidance of grace leads Godfrey to you. You are Godfrey's boss fight. You are the last person in his way to becoming Elden Lord once again. So you fight. And mechanically, he is second only to Moog, and he's very close to Moog in terms of mechanical satisfaction when it comes to mastering his fight. The gap is so tiny that all of these other things put him above Moog. All these little compounding tiny details that make his fight just so thematically and narratively satisfying. And then you get into Horalu. Do I have to talk much about Horalu? It is one of the few Soulsborne bosses that I feel actual hype when fighting. Like, there's a difference between, oh, this guy's really fun to fight, he's got a really satisfying moveset, and this guy is hype as fuck, and I am getting hyped as fuck fighting him. I guess that's what happens when you fight a guy who's basically a fucking lucha libre WWE wrestler. There's never been another boss with this kind of moveset. It's almost all grab attacks. The man's a grappler. He's leaping up into the air and making the ground explode. He's doing axe kicks. He's doing body slams. He's ridiculous in the best ways. He is the absurdity that we get in a lot of FromSoft games taken to the greatest extent. It is the best version of the ridiculous spectacle that we get from Soulsborne bosses. And at the very end, once you've defeated him, you have proven that you are worthy of taking that crown and becoming the next Elden Lord. Because a crown is warranted with strength. And it is because of Godfrey's many strengths as a boss that he takes the top spot as what I consider to be the best boss in Elden Ring, and frankly, for me, joins the upper echelon of some of the greatest bosses in FromSoft's Soulsborne catalog, up there with the likes of Ludwig, Ishin, and Gale. But what do you guys think? Maybe you disagree, maybe you don't. Let me know down in the comments. I'm very interested in seeing what you guys have to say. But with that, that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I have multiple playlists full of Elden Ring content. If you enjoy discussing Elden Ring with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.